Hey there, Mike.
Hey, Joe,
Trying to get my camera to go on.
here you go. See if you can. We want to see your handsome mug. Well, as distinguished as always.
There we are,
Where's home base now?
Grafton.
So you sold the great house there in Cedarburg a couple of years,
Yeah, it was starting to feel like we were working for the property, I mean,
and I know the feeling. Where did you go in Grafton?
right on 12th Avenue, which is turns into Green Bay Road.
Sure.
So it's like the main street coming out of downtown,
Right.
about 2 blocks north.
You guys like the idea of just walking somewhere to get a espresso or something.
Well, we wanted a smaller house so we could maybe be a little less cash poor and we wanted to do some other stuff. And in fact, one of the things we've done recently is bought a 35,000 square foot building in Grafton, and we're fixing it up,
Awesome.
commercial condos.
You've done that before, or not as condos. You did the coffee shop building years ago.
Yeah, that was my first advertising headquarters.
Yeah, that was the Yes Myth.
Hmm.
Well, hey, it was great to see you. We should be playing softball still, I think.
Oh my God. I could still go yard. I can't
Yeah,
run the
you think?
bases though.
I I don't know. I got a pinched nerve in my neck, so my for the longest time I couldn't even lift my hand this high. Now I've got full mobility, but I've got like half power. So I might have turned into your brother. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll just go to right field every time.
It sucks getting old.
Yeah, I
I don't
guess.
recommend it. I do not recommend it.
Well, hey, I appreciate you jumping on here. And so it sort of acts as learning lessons podcast and whatever the hell this is going to be. But you're certainly one of the guys that I thought about interviewing here for it. In short, just as I had mentioned to you, is so this platform has got me really excited because I think it's a way that people connect more than I've seen in other platforms.
Mhm.
It's still kind of an infant, and so that may or may not be true long term. But in the short term here, I think that it certainly is. And so you, as Joe Locher, are still working in this industry in your own way. And what I guess I would have you do, you were certainly one of the strongest voices here in Milwaukee for advertising creative. I wonder if you could give us a little bit of a what you are doing right now, but then take us back to before you even went to school. Were you the kid who was destined to get into this industry, or were you going someplace else? And maybe you
Yeah.
can march us through a
I
little
think
bit.
I was the kid destined to be in this industry, but I didn't know it at the time. I
Okay.
mean, there were signs like I was doing short films for high school book reports.
Okay.
You
Why?
know,
Just because?
I enjoyed it. I was trying to, I had a voice and I was trying to express it, and that's what I did for fun.
Okay.
Uh, and actually, when the way I got into it is I was sports editor of my high school newspaper,
All right.
and I had entered some national sports writing contests and done really well and won one of them. And so I thought I was going to go into journalism.
Okay.
So I started at Marquette in College of Journalism, and my first assignment in my first journalism class was they give you a bunch of facts, and you're supposed to write it into a little news story. So I wrote the hell out of this thing. I mean, it was Hemingway-esque. And I got the paper back and it just said no on the top of it in red. And all of the facts and items were circled and there's arrows everywhere. The whole thing was covered in red ink. And the way they want these stories written, there's the five W's, the who, what, when, where, why, and how, and you're supposed to put them in order and all that stuff. It's like I was thinking, okay, a monkey could do this. There's
You
no
did
way there's a
not stay in the
yeah.
room.
There's no career path here for me.
Okay.
And so I thought I got to get out of journalism. And my brother happened to be a year ahead of me at Marquette in the College of Business, and he was struggling with the accounting and the statistics classes, and he's substantially smarter than I am. So I thought that there's no path for me in the School of Business. So then I discovered advertising, which was in the College of Journalism. It was kind of businessy, but there wasn't all the math. And I thought, okay, this, this seems like a good path for me. I had never really, at that time, which was in the early 80s, no one, there was no TV shows about cool ad guys like Mad Men and stuff. No, it wasn't really on the radar as something that people do for a career, at least not in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Our dads didn't work on Madison Avenue or anything. So I sort of stumbled into it, but um, I liked it a lot. And in fact, in my first copywriting class was taught by this New York copywriter who was burned out and he was taking a break. And first day of class, he said, everyone brought a pen and paper. Okay, write an ad about the pen and turn them in. I'm going to critique them on the spot. And he got to mine and he said, okay, who wrote this? And I raised my hand. He said, you stay after class.
So
And so I stayed
he actually gave you Wolf of Wall Street before
Mhm. Yeah.
selling this pen.
No, that's an old shtick. And
Yeah, absolutely.
uh, he said, this, you're a natural at this, and this is what you're going to do for a living. And so
What was
from
his
that,
name?
his name was Dave Wesson.
Is he still with us?
I haven't looked him up in a while. I don't know. I mean, you got to understand, that
Yeah,
was, before
years
the
ago.
internet. So
Yeah,
there's no record of anything that happened.
I know. There's some great mentors, and it's interesting you tell that story. I went into pre-law because it sounded cool, and then took some business courses and got to the accounting stuff, and I'm like, no, no. And I was lucky enough to find somebody in advertising design. I'm like, you can get paid for this? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, let's do that. So that's neat. So did you get an internship?
No, well, what
Did
he
you get
did was,
into it?
what he told me that first day was, I'm going to grade you different than everybody else in the class. And by the end of the semester, even if you have something that would get an A,
Yeah,
if there are things on it that don't ring quite true, or changes that should be made, I'm going to ask you to make them. But by the end of the semester, you'll have a book that could get you a job in New York City.
awesome.
So it's exactly what you hope to have in college.
What a
I
blessing.
found my way.
Yeah. And in hindsight, was it?
Was it the book, you mean?
Was the book
Yeah, I mean, upon graduation, I had really nice offers from two local agencies. I had an offer at a shop called Ads Inc., which was run by this cool guy named Ken Eichenbaum,
yep,
and he said, "I'm going to teach you every aspect of this business. You're going to go to all the client meetings. You're going to learn the ropes. So you're going to learn how to run your own shop here." And my other offer was from what was then called Frankenberry Laughlin Constable. And
was the name in Milwaukee at the time?
yeah, I didn't really know the difference, honestly,
Right.
at that point, because I was just coming out of school. But I did know, I could feel the vibe there. It was more like, okay, this is the fast track. I think I'd like to work here. But it's a completely different offer. It was, you're going to start at the bottom and you do whatever we tell you, and you're going to be lucky to work on real ads in your first year, kind of thing. But you're learning from the best. And so right away there was a fork in the road.
Yeah, interesting fork too.
Yeah, yeah. And
And for people who are getting we're old timers in this thing, and frankly, Milwaukee was not really on anybody's radar at the time. The two names you just mentioned, well, Frank Barry Laughlin, the whole bit. I already interviewed Pat Laughlin, so they've got a taste of the sun. Uh,
mhm,
but Eichenbaum is a legend in Milwaukee, as well. So
right.
you had some good people, whether you knew it or not, that
Mhm.
either choice was going to be probably a great choice.
Well, either choice would have worked. There wasn't a bad choice there, but what I forgot to mention was when I decided to major in advertising, I decided they were pushing me hard at Marquette to get a marketing minor,
Okay,
and I decided to take an English minor because I really wanted to be exposed to the classics and I wanted to become a beautiful writer
right.
because I saw myself as a person that was going to be part of crafting things instead of a person that was going to be administrating. And I think that's why I gravitated towards the Frankenberry job because I wanted to be a hotshot writer. I didn't want to be a guy that ran an agency at that
You weren't
time.
ready to even. Do you think you were entrepreneurial though? you became, but
I
at that,
became entrepreneurial only because of my dissatisfaction with the status quo.
gotcha.
I think the one thing I did catch right out of school was the huge rift between creatives and account executives,
Yep,
and I definitely saw myself, and I identified as a creative, and I didn't want to come down on the wrong side of that equation, so um, I liked the idea of honing my craft and being someone who could write killer ads as opposed to being someone who presents and sells killer ads. And it was only 10 years later that I became a good presenter in front of clients and things like that.
sure. When when Frankenberry passed, were you there?
I was there when he had his sort of fall from grace.
Yeah.
So, we actually all went there was a bar next door called the Swing and Door, and it was the July 3rd. We all went there for lunch and started drinking and playing dice. And, one thing led to another. And I read in the paper the next day that Dennis had an accident, and, the things went from there. But it actually led to my ultimate fall from grace at that agency, because if you've ever seen their headquarters, they're across the street from what used to be the Marine Bank, and we
Yeah.
parked in that big Marine Bank parking structure, 7 stories tall, very kind of small and narrow. At the time, I'm driving a 75 Oldsmobile 4-door, which cleared every corner by that much, and
That's a
you know
boat.
doing this 7 stories up every day.
Yeah.
And every day I would drive past Dennis's spot reserved right downstairs, first floor, reserved for DWF, and it's empty. And it goes on for 3-4 months
Yeah.
because he was in prison. And I started parking in his spot because I thought, what a waste for it to just not be not be used by anyone. And no one informed me the day that he got released on Huber Law and made his triumphant return to the agency, and I was parked in his spot.
God, you're the
And
guy.
yeah, it ended for me shortly after that.
And so after Frankenberry Laughlin, did you go to BVK then, or
I went to Eisner for
that's right, you were with Bill.
11 months. I had written a lot of their new business stuff. I worked on the pitch that won us Kohl's department store and Pick and Save and stuff like that. So we really grew the agency quickly, but I didn't feel like I was being fairly compensated there. And so
And you like the drive to Hales Corners every day.
there was that too, yeah. But we did win a softball championship on the one summer that I was there.
Let's get to what's important. For sure.
But at that time, I had read in the Business Journal that McDonnell Davis had reacquired the Shopko account, and they were hiring a bunch of people. So I called over there and I got a senior writer producer job there. And what was significant about that was, in the course, I mean, when I described those 2 job offers I had gotten out of school, the one for Ads Inc. was 18,000 a year.
Yep.
The one at Frankenberry was 12,000 a year. And so I took the Frankenberry one and got him up to 15,000. Now it sounds ridiculously low, but I mean, at that time, that's what the salaries were coming out of school.
Right. My first, I apparently held out for more. I started at 18.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, and then it made the big leap. I mean, the lessons you learn. I was at the agency. We lost the senior art director and creative director. And I remember going to the owner, and I didn't know the difference between a creative director and art director. He said, "What do you want? What we really need you." I said, "I want to be creative director." I just thought it sounded cooler.
Mm-hmm. It does.
But he didn't give me any bump in pay. And like a couple of years later, I got offered like 26 and took it. And it's like, but not for the right reason. I took it for the money and not because it was a career advancement, and went through 9 months of hell. And I ended up going back and I got 26 from them, but I had to go through 9 months of like disaster, which was ultimately good. You just learn so much when you make mistakes. But
yeah, well, I learned a lot by getting fired from my first job, honestly. Learned what not to do.
Everybody should be fired at some point in
Yeah.
time in their career.
And In fact, Steve Laughlin used to call me into his office regularly and give me talks, father-son style talks, even though he's only not that much older than me. And you know, he'd say the best thing, sometimes I think the best thing I could do for you would be to fire you. And I'd give him the Caddyshack speech in return. I'd say, Steve, I know I've made some mistakes in the past, but I want to be good. And he would just like, what am I going to do with this guy? So you learn your lessons. But the point I was going to make was, so I started at 15 essentially, and I worked at Frankenberry for 2 years. I had gotten up to 25,000 a year there. When I was switched over to Eisner, it was at 30. But then 11 months later, when I jumped to McDonnell Davis, um, the salary there was for 40. And I was still only 24 years old.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's like, okay, that's starting to pick up steam. And I think that's worth mentioning that um, sometimes the way to really make good advancements is to jump around a little bit, especially earlier in your career.
Well, I think in our industry, and this is where you and I both have been out of the inside those agencies. Moving up is moving out.
Yeah.
Was basically the answer, what I learned early on.
Mm-hmm.
Although I came to a fork in the road with this particular agency, and I chose to jump out. And I often wonder, they were in a quandary, and if I stayed, the guy was a much, much older guy. He would have groomed me to be the guy. And I wasn't ready for that yet, but I wonder if that wouldn't have been, quote unquote, the smarter choice, because I wouldn't have come down to Milwaukee. I would have stayed in Minneapolis and been the probably youngest owner of a decent shop in the city. And they didn't have the money to pay it, but the clients were solid clients, Bridgman's Ice Cream and Hardware Hank and Valspar paints and stuff like that. And it's like, I chose not to. I chose to go a different route, and you make those choices, and then your world tumbles in different directions. And it was kind of always on a money gig, but you wonder, and you don't get those chances back. So
Well, to continue my crawl to the top,
well,
after
you ascended.
I ended up being at McDonnell Davis for 8 years,
Yeah.
and was when my final position there was vice president creative director and was running the creative department. And I really liked that the setup there. I had done all the spots on the agency reel, and I had taken us out of the healthcare world into some interesting other clients like Norwest Bank, and had a cool staff, and I really liked where we were headed. And just at that time, Dick McDonald decided to sell the agency without telling any of the management team. And so we were basically acquired by BVK. And there was going to be a whole new culture, a whole new pecking order. And I resigned the day that the merger became final, because I had kind of worked my way into a position of being the guy, as you say, and then it was going to be, going to be swapped back around. And I wasn't up for that. So I started my own shop, and that's when I started thinking entrepreneurially. And I wanted to make a point about this too, because I think I don't think ad agencies are what they used to be. And if you're going into the business now, I don't even know that ad agencies are going to be around in their current form in the next 10 years. So I started what I call a zero overhead creative shop. It's a one-man company basically. And I would just job out the things I needed. If one of my clients wanted a research project, we'd bring in a research company and pay them for their work, and then they would go on their way. And so it was basically a consultancy. I didn't call it that at the time. I called it a zero overhead ad agency, but it was a consultancy. And I still run a form of that to this day, 30 years later. Um, and clients tend to like it because you work with the top, you're not working with junior people. You're working with someone who's been around and whose work you like. And basically, the thing about ad agencies that I would like anyone aspiring to get into this business to understand is I've been quoted in the press as saying that A typical ad agency is a handful of brilliant minds surrounded by an office building full of leeches.
Mhm.
And the leeches suck off the brain power of the few brilliant minds, and everyone gets paid. But my original idea was, why not get out of the office building full of leeches and just offer the brilliant minds a la carte?
Yeah.
And that has become a lot more how the industry works now, 30 years later. And I think it's going to go more in that direction. So I would encourage people getting into this business to specialize enough in something so you don't become one of the leeches. Be valued for your brain power and for what you can bring, and not just your billable hours.
Tell me a little bit about that. You were able to, I mean, when you and I started, uh, being a copywriter, being an art director, and being a suit, and all those different titles were very separate things. It didn't take me long to realize, the creative director is the job that I wanted to have. Because as an art director, you on the copy side and the art director, it seemed like, well, only the copywriters became creative directors. And two, the copywriter would write a great piece of copy and slide it under the door, and I would make it look good. And it was like, that's not the role I want to play.
Mhm,
For how but for both of us, I think we learned how to think,
mhm.
how to solve problems, how to get to the root of what is the pain point, how am I going to solve it, and then how am I going to be funny, how am I going to be witty, how am I going to be clever, in those
Well,
ways.
yeah, and in fact, I had
Made a
mentioned
career.
that I decided to go with a advertising major and an English minor because I wanted to learn to write beautifully and I wanted to master that craft. But if you really wanted to master the craft of advertising, you're gonna, the real craft is empathy,
Mm.
empathy for the audience, and you'd be you'd be an expert at psychology, sociology, philosophy, a lot of the understanding of the human condition kind of wisdom that I fear is kind of leaving our industry now, and it's becoming a fire hose of content instead of um, uh, finely crafted stilettos of inspiration that are delivered to a pre-determined target. And I think that's something that's going to have to be figured out because, well, let me give you this example. Um, I had coffee last weekend with a young man who was just entering his last semester at the University of Kansas, and he wanted to talk to me the same way we're talking now. And I asked him what his major was, and he said it was digital marketing. So I was like, well, that's a major, and he said, yeah. I said, well, what is the expertise? And he's like, oh, it's like SEO and the algorithms and uh, the Google Analytics. It's that kind of stuff. And I had a long talk with him about, well, digital marketing and social media is it's a tactic. It's not a strategy. And I mean that's it's you think it's social media. You think it's like, okay, well, what are the mediums? There's TV, radio, outdoor,
Sure.
and social. Let's say, but you would never think of majoring in outdoor.
Yeah.
It's a medium. It's like, so even though you're going to major
You
in,
can be quite a crafted person at that, and there are different rules of
yes,
the
but
game to it.
I think you'd be better off understanding marketing, the classics of marketing, which is connecting with an audience and taking all those finely crafted tools at your disposal and finding that nugget of inspiration and then delivering it to this audience. I mean, and it disturbed me a little bit to think in terms of people majoring in algorithms and analytics,
Yeah.
because that's not really what we do.
It might be what he does, but I would worry for him that in an AI world, tell me that the AI isn't going to have the analytics down to a science. To me, what you
Right.
described at the start, and I think I saw a LinkedIn thing. You probably saw it too. Maybe it was Avi Merkel or whatever who brought it up. all the AI stuff and can provide, loads of content and can carve up different things to feed a content machine. But what you say on empathy, I think it'll be a sad day if AI is the one that's empathetic, right?
I think that's the one thing it's never going to get to be
Right.
able to
And
do
so
because
to me, I feel like AI guys need to learn how to, if they're trying to get some support or to speed the time frame, not sure how it works. You're gonna have to ask some really, really good questions of AI to give you choices, then to redecide how you want to do it. But even then, you're
even then they're going to be a version of pickup lines in a bar.
right. It's like a sophomoric address
Yeah.
on, I when I first started playing around with ChatGPT, it was like, okay, I can see some benefit in giving, just like if it was you and I in a room and we wanted to get some starter lines, okay, fine. It wants to go down these 10 paths, but I don't know that this is going to be the Lord help us if the Clio and the Canon Gold is going to be a AI line. We have fallen.
Well, the other thing, speaking of names from the past, I mean, one of my early mentors is someone I never met, but I studied his work and read everything I could on his interviews was Hal Riney.
Sure.
Ran a shop in San Francisco. You can look him up if you're interested. But he said something once that I thought was so brilliant, which is we're concerned. He said all of our work is concerned with convincing 10% of the people 100% of the way instead of 100% of the people 10% of the way. And that makes so much sense if you think about it, because the 10% of the people that you convince all the way, those are the ones that are going to buy your product. They're the ones you're going to do business with. Convincing 100% of the people 10% of the way sounds an awful lot to me like getting a like on social media or a
Yeah.
follow. And it's like, I'm afraid that our industry has confused likes and follows on social media with sales. And it is not the same thing, and it's never going to be the same thing. And
I
so I would, the reason I bring that up is I think if you're getting into this business, you should be careful that you don't get sucked into the fire hose content category of creating the 100% of the content that everyone does a slight shrug at and looks the other way, because marketing is always going to be about how to make a certain audience care about the product that you're being hired to put in front of them. And it's like that's going to require all of those skills we were talking about, all that understanding of humanity, all that stuff. I don't think it's really about algorithms and analytics as much as it is about inspiration and empathy. And I hope that they are training the next generation that way.
Yeah, I don't know. In part, my getting involved in this is I think you need to know how to think, and
Mhm.
you phrase it as empathy. To me, um, it's like when we learn that ultimately we're salespeople, but it's what you're talking about on 10% of the way is hucksterism versus if I'm really a great salesman with a great product, I don't have to sell a damn thing. I just need to find the person who recognizes that this product is actually what they need.
Mhm. Well,
And
what you're really doing is I mean, think about a well-written creative brief, all of the information you can get on one page. And secondly, when's the last time you saw a well-written creative brief? Because I think it's a lost art.
yeah,
But if you are given enough information at your first meeting when you're getting your assignment, that you can get inside the mind of your audience and you can understand what makes them tick, and then you can take the things that your client wants to talk about and turn it into a series of it's an exercise in psychology. You're going to push their buttons in such a way that you trigger something in them that responds to your message. And it's like that is a tall order.
yeah,
And it takes a lot of it takes a varied and impressive skill set to be good at that.
yeah. And oh, by the way, kid, you need to do it in 29 seconds.
Yeah.
Which is
No,
also
7 now I'm being told.
yes, and it's a lost art because now on internet there really is no time limit, right? And so you can, uh, I suppose it's why we scrutinize Super Bowl so much that we do, and how few Super Bowl ads really live up to the billing that you would like them to be. And Lord help us, I mean, we've all been in those meetings where there's 10 other suits at that table, and trying to get your great idea through the gauntlet is a tall order indeed.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to go too long here, but you've already dropped some good nuggets. Tell anything that you can think of in terms of, well, let's put it this way. If the young person, in essence, wants to be you, one,
Mhm.
should they? And two, if they wanted to be, who, how would you talk to you now if you went
Mhm.
back to that kid at
Yeah,
Mark?
well, that's a good question. As I mentioned, I don't think you could really have a career at an ad agency starting now, 30 or 40 years into the future, because I think I don't know that they're going to be there. So my advice, to this kid that I talked to last weekend coming out of Kansas was, I would say, I think maybe concentrate on the client side. And what I mean by that is, if there's a find a figure out what's important to you and find some brands that stand for the things you want to stand for and try to get in at one of those. I mean, it's like me now, if I could build my career now, I'd rather run a division of Ralph Lauren, and
Mm,
I'd rather run the double RL brand or something like that, and figure out, okay, what's our next line look like? What are should we go to the Arizona desert to shoot it? Should we hire Bruce Weber to do it? And should we get these models? And who should we get to shoot the TV? And what music would there be? It's like you really would get to be hands-on with building a brand that you care about, and I think that's not going to go away.
mm,
The client side brands are not going to go away the way our industry is changing so rapidly, and is difficult to it's a difficult horse to bet on right now, I guess is what I'm saying. And I would think, I mean, if he could get into even some of the clients that I have, West Bend Insurance,
mm.
um, they have when every time I go to their headquarters, they have a palatial headquarters. Everyone there is happy. They have omelet chefs there that make you breakfast, and you know, uh,
It's not a bad
make
life.
a guy making a bouillabaisse for lunch, and they're playing ping pong, and there's a gym inside, and there's woods you can walk around in, and they all go home at 4:45, happy and content. It's like, yeah, that seems like a pretty good way to build a career too.
Yeah, but when you're 27 and you're working at 2 in the morning on some cold pizza,
Mhm.
does it get any better?
It's cool to look back on now, but I'm just saying, if you're going to put all of your chips in the middle of a table, what are you going to bet on? It's like, yeah, and to end up where I have ended up, which is I have a brain that I can put a price tag on and people will buy it by the hour. Have a consultancy, and you can do that same thing having built a couple of brands on the client side too. I mean, the guy that um but I mean, you just think of some of the guy that built Guess Jeans
Mm,
way back when, ended up, also building Swatch Watch and all this other stuff. It's like you can be a branding guru coming from the client side too.
sure, sure. I'll ask one last question and kind of go complete other end of the spectrum, which is okay. So, because it's something I certainly think about. We've figured out how to create the consultancy, and that is what it is. However, it'd be nice to have a business to sell.
Mhm.
How do you think about that? So now here's the person who's in here, and they are a freelancer, or they've been a consultant, or they're running a small shop. How do you look at, you know, how does it end? Do you think that there's because I've contemplated, okay, do I need to rebuild a small firm so that I got something more tangible to
Mhm.
sell, or am I going to simply be a bearded old codger who, that guy still keeps getting clients. I don't know how.
Yeah, okay, I resemble that remark, but I think I
You're
think
younger than me.
there's two strategies. I think I could sell my business to a certain kind of agency that lacks the things that I'm best at. They
Okay.
could, if let's say there was a design firm. Oh, excuse me a sec. Um, uh, let's say there was a design firm that was big enough that they wanted to start. providing services that were more akin to advertising services.
Right.
They wanted to get into broadcast and stuff like that. Well, I have a great broadcast reel. I have that skill set.
Yep.
And you could plug me into their infrastructure and they could grow their business in a whole new way.
Right.
So
You
I
could
would sell
come
my
with them for
business.
2-3 years.
Yeah, I'd come with it for 3 years, and then
Yeah.
we would say, well, if we like what's going on, we'll negotiate a partnership or something. And if not, we'll go our separate ways.
Yep.
And the other thing, short of that, I think what's a nice way to, in lieu of retirement, is to just have a few long-term clients that you can hang on to, and you sort of have 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like West Bend Insurance, I mentioned, I've been doing the Silver Lining campaign for 18 years for them. And I also handle Habish and Rotier and a couple other things. That's like, I mean, you work on a nice ad campaign, it's maybe 3 or 4 months out of your year. You make a nice chunk of change, and then you could do something else for the rest of the year. And from where I sit now, that might be better than retiring.
Right. You know what? I lied. You just brought up one thing with Habish. You followed Chuck into the voiceover land.
I actually taught Chuck how to do voiceovers.
Okay, let's get that right.
Yeah, I started, my first voiceover was in 1997 for New Orleans Police.
That's right.
I wrote a spot about.
I apologize.
Yeah, okay. I wrote a spot that was about.
Was that out of necessity? How did you, or did you recognize, you know what? I think my voice actually has got a quality.
No, it was an accident. There was the spot is it's the voice inside a cop's head, and he's saying, "I wear thin shoes so I can feel the city I love as I walk through it." And we had done it for New Orleans Police, and Alec Baldwin had agreed to do the voiceover for it. But while we were waiting for him, I just got into the booth and did a 1-take spec track so we could cut it and we could sort of, keep the project moving along. And Mr. Baldwin was, not really returning our calls after a while. So people started showing it around, and I got a phone call that said, "Hey, everyone really likes it the way it is." And I'm like, "You got to be kidding me," because when you hear your own voice, you're like, "Oh, that sounds like someone is impersonating."
Yeah.
But that was the first thing, and then I guess I started to develop more work that was in my writer's voice. When you become a good writer, your work has a voice. And it became easy for me to perform my scripts that I had written in my speaking voice.
Sure.
It felt natural. And so I started doing that with Pro Healthcare in 2003. And then it sort of went on from there. And I think Chuck started with Dodge Ram.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was towards the later part of his career, but he made a lot more money at it than I did, because I think when you have a national brand, you just rake it.
Dodge pays a little bit more and you get in a few markets. Yeah, a little residual there.
I don't. You think Dodge Ram pays more than the New Orleans Police?
It's just a hunch. Just a hunch. Well, hey, this has been great. I really appreciate it, and I hope the people who do all 3 of them, hopefully all 3,000 of them at some point, and understand. They may not. Some people will recognize your name. Some people will not. And from me to you, it's like you've helped own this town, Milwaukee, and helped put it on the map in an era when small market cities really weren't getting seen. And I had the good fortune of being in Minneapolis when it changed over, and you just got the notion of, shit, good work is just where you make it. It doesn't have to be made in New York or LA or London or whatever. And then all of a sudden we start to see Raleigh and Miami and Salt Lake City and Portland. And it's like, okay, it's not the city, it's the people who are putting some really good craftsmanship into the work that gets noticed. And you're one of those guys here in Milwaukee. So
thanks, Mike.
thank you for helping putting Milwaukee on the map.
Well, thanks. As it is, it's still a flyover.
It's still trying, but the work is good, and I really feel great for Pat over at Laughlin. They just signed, like Damp Red, and it's like, what are the kinds of brands that you can get coming here? But again, the Minneapolis thing was when Porsche was willing to go to Minneapolis, briefly. It's like, well, wait a second, okay, the lid is off, and just go and do it. Why don't you? You know, stop complaining. It's not because the work isn't finding you, you're not finding it. So,
Mhm.
and make it. And make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, great to talk to you. We'll have to do a lunch somewhere along the line and
Sure.
about other
Yeah,
things.
but you have to see this building I'm
Yeah,
neck deep
I'm
in.
eager. I'm eager. I know that you guys always put your best work into it. So
Okay, well, my agency is now called Lyrical.
Lyrical,
You can see my stuff at lyricalplace.com.
perfect.
And yeah, it's been a pleasure chatting.
And if somebody is looking for a job there,
Um,
what's
well,
the best chance?
it'd be by project only,
Correct.
Yeah, but
So send a good book. What do you want to
mhm.
see?
What would I want to see?
Yeah.
I'd want to see people that are good at the things that I'm not good at. And I think at the top of that list is social media
Okay.
because I'm not sold on it. I never concentrated on it. I'm an old school dinosaur that
So
likes to do 60
if they can
second.
sell you, they may have the job.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep. I still think 60-second TV is the holy grail. So
Okay. Well, you're good at it. All right. Take care. Have a great cold. It is what?
Mhm.
-5, and we're still in Wisconsin. So I'm telling you, if the Yes Men want to return for a triumphant Las Vegas softball, who wouldn't want to hire 60-year-old guys to go and hit it
Well,
around?
they do have 60 and over tournaments now. That might be more our speed.
There you go. Sounds like a winner. Take
Okay,
care.
man. Take it easy.
See ya.